Dear parent or guardian, you're receiving this letter because the school your child attends is at risk of being closed by June the 30th, 2017 due to academic failure for many years. That's the first line of a letter sent to thousands of parents last month in Detroit, Michigan.
The U.S. state is at the center of a heated debate about the best way to educate America's children. I'm Malika Bilal.
I'm Femi Okay, and you're in the stream.
Hi, I'm Daniela Poppy Thornton, founder of learningservice.info, and I'm in the stream.
Michigan has one of the highest number of charter schools in the country, and 80% of them are for profit. But what exactly is a charter school?
So, yesterday, when I heard some parents talking about charter schools, I was all ears. One woman says, "I've heard charter schools are fantastic, but they're impossible to get into." And then another one says, "No way, don't you read the paper? They're all fronts for stealing government money." And then this dad chimes in, "Oh, come on, supposedly they have really high test scores, but they're insanely strict." So I went online, and was I ever surprised to learn just how different charter schools can be? Of the over 5,000 charter schools nationwide, some are extraordinarily high performing, but others are, well, the opposite. One thing I learned, charter schools are not one species. So what are they then? They are free public schools. Usually they're non-selective, but not always. When there's high demand, students are chosen by lottery. And they all have their own charter to operate independently outside the local school district. This gives each charter school more freedom to make decisions about how to spend money and serve students. In exchange, charter schools are supposed to be accountable. If they don't meet certain standards, they can have their charter revoked and shut down.
The new U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, has been the lead architect of the charter school system in Michigan and what's known as the school choice movement. Supporters say it offers parents more choice and higher education standards. Critics say that charter schools undermine traditional public schools and lack accountability and transparency.
So, have charter schools helped or hurt Michigan? And how might DeVos's policies shape the U.S. education agenda? Well, here to help us discuss, we're joined by Gary Nayert. He's the executive director of the Great Lakes Education Project. He's in Lansing, Michigan. Erin Einhorn is a senior correspondent for Chalkbeat. That's a nonprofit news organization focused on education. She's in Detroit, Michigan.
Whitrice Harris is a parent organizer with 482 Forward in Detroit, Michigan. That's a parent youth neighborhood organization. And Terrence Martin is the vice president of the Detroit Federation of Teachers, also in Detroit. Welcome, everybody. Whitrice, I'm sure you've seen a lot of homework in your day as a mum, as a parent. If you were giving the Michigan education system a grade, don't hold back, what would the grade be?
Overall, the Michigan education system in Detroit would definitely receive a D.
Ooh.
Definitely receive a D. And that is the overall system and how it works, not the children in the system.
Terrence, what would your grade be?
Well, I have to agree with Whitrice. It's not so much the children in the system. It's not so much the teachers in the system, but it's the system overall. And it encompasses not just Detroit, but the entire state of Michigan. And it's not succeeding right now.
Right.
And it definitely needs some changes.
Would it be a D for you too, Terrence?
It would be.
Gary?
Well, I'd say the Detroit school system is failing and would get an F grade. And 85% of the schools in Detroit are in the bottom quartile of the state, and no students, no more than 50% of students even anywhere in the state are proficient in any grade or any subject. So we have our work cut out for us here in Michigan and especially in Detroit.
Gary, what happened? What's been happening in Michigan that you've got a system, an education system that is so poorly rated?
Well, I think we have a generation of failure by the traditional public school system in all of our urban cities. It's not unique to Michigan. It's something we see in a lot of areas of the country, but there is something uniquely bad that's been happening in the Detroit public schools that has led to the exodus of students and parents voting with their feet to take a district from 180,000 students 15 years ago to 45,000 students today. I mean, that's a lot more loss of enrollment than you can explain through just a sagging economy or a lower birth rates. So the system has been failing students for generations, and it's in desperate need of repair.
So those conditions that you all laid out there is the reason that there are several people online saying that's why we need school choice. That's a word that we hear, that term we hear thrown around a lot online. And for some people it means different things. But having access to what you want is what Lynn says it is. She says, I'm a supporter of freedom, personal choice, individualism, capitalism, and kids first education. On the other hand, though, school choice to this person, this is Katie Osgood, and she says charters represent false choices. They tend to be low quality test prep factories for the poor. They discriminate against students with special needs, and they harm the system. White-Treese, your view, do charters represent an accurate choice in that school choice dilemma?
You know, in Detroit, and I can only speak about Detroit, in Detroit I have not seen it as an accurate choice. We have way too many schools in general for way too few students. And what has happened is we have no coordination, no oversight, no anything for the charter schools. So they kind of open up willy-nilly in the city all over, and no one is overseeing it. And they kind of close down, open up, close down, and Gary says parents vote with their feet, but in Detroit, our transportation system is not great. And so where they tend to open the charters up are in more affluent neighborhoods. And so they make the choice for us.
Aaron, it sounds very fluid.
Well, I think it's safe to say that it's not accurate to say that there's no oversight of charter schools. There's no centralized big government oversight. There's no single person who has the control to open or close schools throughout the city. So that's accurate to say. There's not a controlled government oversight.
But that's not what I mean by that. What I mean by that is there's no one in the city where the children are, where the parents are, where the teachers are. There is no one in the city that has any say over these charter schools. And we
I certainly agree
with
that.
Every charter school has a board of directors of local community leaders, and 70% of the charter schools in Detroit are operated by Detroiters. They're not operated by management companies from far away. These are operated by Detroiters.
And those companies aren't accountable to anyone. They're definitely not accountable to citizens of Detroit, those are the folks that matter the most in this conversation.
Well, they're certainly accountable to the parents of the cities.
I think that the other thing that we have to remember in this conversation is that at one point Detroit Public Schools was thriving. It was a thriving school district, and it wasn't until 1999 where the state of Michigan took over our school system and appointed a reform board, so to speak, to cover our schools. We were at one point one of the most innovative school districts in the nation in terms of urban school districts, and those things were taken away from us. And so that's one of the things that is really germane to this conversation that we have to definitely talk about.
Guess, let me just play.
It's revisionist history to suggest that DPS was a model school district,
Detroit
and that the state of Michigan took it over because they just wanted to, and there was nothing wrong with the district.
Gentlemen, let me bring us up to date, and I also want to pull in Erin into this conversation. Erin, I'm going to play you an ad. It's from Detroit Public Schools ad. It's a little old, but I think you'll get the point when you see the ad. Have a look.
Why do parents send their kids to charter schools without asking questions?
Like, who owns your school?
Is it accredited? Who's the principal?
Can I see their credentials? What are your MEP scores? SAT scores?
How come all of your teachers are not certified? They're shady.
Do you have a gym?
A track? A pool? Sports? Fine and performing arts?
Do you do a complete criminal background check on every employee?
Hey, parents want us to do our homework. They should do theirs too.
Don't experiment with charter schools. Come home to DPS.
I don't think I have ever seen a public school doing an ad where it's been trying to be so convincing. It's got cute little kids in it. It tugs at the heartstrings. What is going on here where public school system is trying to encourage parents to send their kids there? What's happening right now between public schools and charter schools?
Well, the situation in Detroit right now is a very competitive one. So you have there's actually more seats available in schools right now in the city of Detroit some say 30,000 more seats available in Detroit schools than there are children who want them. And there's a variety of reasons for why that is, but the effect of it is that schools, and the way school funding works in Michigan as well as a lot of other states, is that you get a certain amount of money for each child you enroll. So if you don't enroll enough children, you don't have enough money to pay your bills or to pay your staff. So what happens is that the charter schools, and the city is roughly half and half, for better or worse, half district schools that are part of the Detroit Public Schools and half charter schools. And the parents, have lots of options. They have a lot of choices, the school choice. And I think parents are happy to have choices. But what happens is that the parents don't necessarily have the right tools that they need to make those choices. And so schools have to compete. So they take out ads on TV, on billboards, on the radio. Hey, enroll in my school, enroll in this school. We'll give you an iPad. We'll give you a computer. We'll hire a Chinese
And hold on a minute. Hold on. You are bribing. They're bribing kids to go to the school.
Gimmicks.
Like joining a gym. It's like you join the gym and we'll give you 3 weeks free workout. You come to our school and we'll give you an iPad.
Right, or some other kind of gimmick, or
that's a bribe.
Or not necessarily a gimmick, but a feature. Like we'll have
a feature.
Chinese or Japanese or whatever, something that they can use, because every school needs to try to stand out.
Wow.
Because parents have parents in Detroit don't just have district school and charter schools. In Michigan, we have schools of choice, meaning you don't have to go to school in the city. You can go to the suburbs. So there are, countless choices.
Because there was a time where if you lived in a certain area, you could only go to the school in that area. But
right.
Yeah.
So historically,
prior to 1993, every student went to the school that they were assigned to by the government.
Yeah.
But in Michigan, we changed that culture, and now the school districts don't own those students. They don't own the dollars that go with those students. Parents are in charge, and they can choose from neighboring districts, from charter schools, from private schools, or from homeschooling. So we're trying to put the parents in charge of their child's education, and what we really lack is good information for parents about how schools really perform. And that's why we're working so hard to develop a new accountability system in the state that will give parents the kind of information they need to know if a school is performing or not performing.
So I want to bring up one of the fears that some online have about this. This is David, who writes on Twitter, students with disabilities and minorities will suffer the most. It's shameful. We also got a video comment from someone who's speaking on that same theme of students with disabilities. This is Aaron Weinberg. He's a PhD candidate at the University of Texas in Austin. Have a listen to what he told us.
Under Secretary DeVos, President Trump, and our current Congress, I think there's a well-founded concern in the special education community that potential changes to IDEA, reduced federal oversight for K through 12 education, and the reallocation of a significant portion of public federal funds toward private education could jeopardize this right. People who would be most affected by potential changes to special education policy and practice should be an integral part of this conversation that we're having.
Now, Terrence, he's referencing, for our international audience, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that governs how states can fund institutions to treat people, young people with disabilities. Do you think those fears are valid, Terrence?
They certainly are, and what we've seen here in Detroit. Look, this is for the audience out there. Detroit Public Schools has one of the largest special education populations around the state. We educate students who are autistic impaired, emotionally impaired, learning disabled, etc. You name it, we run the gamut of special needs here in our school district. And we have some of the most qualified teachers who instruct students in those areas, from school psychologists to speech and language professionals, to social workers, etc. One of the things that we have noticed over the years in many of our charter schools, that they don't provide that same type of education to our students. They don't provide those same services. And what tends to happen is when parents decide to take their kids out of a traditional public school and send them to a charter school, then they will find
Terrence, but aren't
that in many
parents
instances
taking
they're
their
not able
kids
to do
out
that.
of the school because the school is not good enough for them? They want better for their kids. They're not leaving because the school is great. They're leaving because they want better.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think in some instances, parents are taking their kids out because the school isn't good enough. But what we'll argue here in Detroit is that
why should the kids stay there if the school's not good enough?
Well, I think that we're talking about a couple of different things here. We're not talking about just leaving the school district. We're talking about leaving schools. And if you find that the school that your child is going to at this present time isn't servicing your needs, then there are other schools within our school district that could. And we're urging parents here to explore those options. You know, we've had a large portfolio of schools here in Detroit. From schools that are strictly special education centers to schools that service students and fully immersed in other languages. We have a school, the Foreign Language Immersion School, where kids are learning Mandarin and Japanese and Chinese and are becoming fluent in Spanish and French and those things. And so those are the things that we're really
in
pushing
this country would never have offered
parents to know
the
here in
kind
our
of
school district.
magnet schools or special theme schools if it weren't for the existence of school choice. We see it in districts all over the country that they are doing things to be more competitive. They're doing things to meet the needs of students and families. And that's what should be happening.
Gary,
and so that's what school choice does.
Gary,
it really
you say competitive. I'm just wondering if you envisage this happening. I'm just going to show you 4 billboards. Here's one. Tuition-free K-12 public school. K-12 is primary and secondary school. Detroit Public Schools, a high-quality school. This is like real estate here. Knowledge and wisdom at Wellspring High School. One more. Grade rates and MEAP scores are up. Did you envisage this happening? I mean, this is like business competing against each other, but we're talking about our kids' education. Erin, are you seeing children being better educated now because they have options? They have schools fighting over them?
I think it depends on which kids. So I have a child who's 5 years old who's going to start kindergarten in the fall. And I'm looking at a lot of options, and I'm frankly really glad I have a lot of options. And I'm looking at both district schools and charter schools. But the difference between me and the vast majority of families in the city of Detroit, keep in mind, I think 65% of the children in the city of Detroit live in poverty. Their parents are in very difficult situations. Something like a quarter of Detroit families do not have a car. And Detroit does not have a fully functioning public transportation system. So I am thrilled that there is school choice in the city of Detroit. I benefit from it. I have a car. I have an accommodating job. I cover education, so I have the skills to go to schools and figure out which school is good, which school is bad, which is going to be best for my child. But the reality is that the last time the state rankings came out in Michigan, there's something like 200 schools in the city of Detroit. 4 of them were in the top 50%, I believe, of schools in the state. So the vast majority of children in the city of Detroit are not going to go to a quality school. My kid's going to go to a quality school.
And I think that's the main point here, because we're being wooed by all of these different billboards and sides of buses and commercials and radio ads. And parents don't know because they don't have the real tools to figure out where a school is good or bad. And, you know, we are looking sometimes at just shiny new buildings, iPads being offered, things of that nature that makes it look good. And so you get the enrollment. But what often happens is once they get in the school, they realize they were actually receiving something better where they were. Or they are in the school and they cannot receive the special needs services that they have a right as a parent a lot of parents do not understand, because the way charters have been marketed so carefully, that charter schools are public schools that use public dollars, and they are supposed to have the same rights that they have at the district school. But so often I hear from parents, I know of a parent who went to a school, their children had special needs, and they were told, of course, after count day, which is the day where all the seats are counted of the students and money is allotted to the school that way. After count day, they were told, unfortunately, the services that their children need, they could not be provided at this particular charter school. And actually, you know what? DPS has the best resources for this.
That's a big old scam after count day. That's a big old scam.
Well, it's also an urban myth, I would tell you, because
it's not an
state
urban
law
myth.
requires
I know a parent
that dollars follow the student.
It is not a myth.
After
not a myth.
When's the last time you have been to Detroit in a school talking
dollars
to parents?
follow the school, follow the student to the school they go to.
Time out, guests. Giving the guests a time out just for a moment, because I just want to push on a little bit right at the end of this show. But Malika, where do we want to go?
Well, Gary, I heard you say that dollars follow the student. There is perception online that they don't. This is Jay Coyote, who says, when you continually strip funding from underfunded public schools, how do you expect them to do a good job? So if as you say, the dollars are following the student and the student goes to charter school, that then, based on Jay Coyote's argument, takes funding away from that school. Another person, though, is picking up on that theme as well. This is Terry Michael on the business and the profit side of this. Have a listen to what she told us.
Alabama passed its charter school law in 2015, yet we've not had any charter schools open yet. And I believe in part that's because the national chains just don't find Alabama to be profitable enough. And that's why, as a public school advocate, I'm so concerned about Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education. She has stated that she will take federal dollars and she'll use it to incentivize vouchers and charters. So that means less funding for school systems like Birmingham, Alabama, that is 100% high poverty Title I schools.
Gary, so what do you make of her argument on less funding for the schools that need it?
Well, it's not true that Betsy DeVos has said that she would take public school money and use it for vouchers or private schools or charter schools in Washington. She has not said that, so let's clear that up. But it takes a while to open up charter schools, and so just because the law was recently passed in Alabama doesn't mean that no schools opening there yet is a sign that they won't open in the future. But in Detroit, total funding for students that attend Detroit public schools is about $18,000 per pupil. And so if money is all it takes, which is more than twice the statewide average, I should add, if money is what it takes to have success, DPS would be the highest performing district in the state, when in fact they're the worst performing district, not only in the state, but in the country. So I don't think that this argument is that it just takes more money.
Terrence, let me just
disingenuine. I think that's a disingenuine argument.
It is, and we just mentioned earlier.
All right, guys, just hold tight for a moment. Let me throw one more thought at you, because then I'm just going to take you all to our online post show so we can all expand on our conversation here. An image here. This is Betsy DeVos. She's very well known in Michigan. She's very well known for being a supporter of school choice, a school choice system, and now she is Secretary of Education. This conversation that we've been having, Terrence, about what's been happening in Michigan, could this happen on a national scale?
Certainly can. It certainly can. And with folks like Betsy DeVos as our Secretary of Education, we're closer to the nation being Detroit and being Michigan than we are away from it. But one of the things that I want to mention here is, this whole argument that Detroit gets this $18 million, and if it was up to just money, that we should be one of the highest performing school districts in the nation. And that's simply not true. And we have to talk about the difference between equality and equity. And we talked about earlier how we have a large population of
Terrence,
yes.
I hear this is a big thought, and I have 30 seconds, and I don't want to squeeze your big thought into 30 seconds. So what I am going to say is Terrence Martin, Wychus Harris, Erin Einhorn, and Gary Nayert, I'm taking you and our community online to our post show. And that post show is at stream.aljazeera.com. If you're watching on TV, jump on your computer. If you're watching on aljazeera.com, jump on stream.aljazeera.com, and we will continue this conversation and dig deep on what Terence and Whiteris and Erin and Gary want to tell us further. Thanks so much for watching the TV show. See you soon. Hello again. Terence, you were about to say something. I knew it was going deep, and I need you to have
Certainly.
time. So pick up where you left off. Go ahead.
Certainly. So this notion of simply giving every child in every school district the same amount of money and expecting them to achieve at great lengths is simply unfair. We can't talk about give everyone the same amount of money and everyone will be successful. We know that certain groups of children, certain school districts, certain areas need more than others. And Detroit is one of those. So let's look at equity. Let's look at exactly what it takes to educate a child in Detroit from kindergarten to 12th grade, and what is that cost? Right now, we're looking at
how much would it be, Terence? What's the good number?
I don't know the
answer.
I don't know
for how much it takes to educate a child.
Let's do an equity
because we're not talking about giving people the same amount.
And let's do an equity study. Because
in Michigan,
we
do fund differently based on different needs.
250 vacancies in Detroit public schools. 150 classrooms are being manned by substitute teachers. Let's take care of the basics. Let's get a quality public school teacher, certified teacher in front of every child at every classroom. Let's start there. Let's make sure that kids have books and supplies. Let's make sure that the class size for children in K-12 is organized at a level in which increases the success rate. Let's start there.
So Terence, help me out here. Terence and Erin, you can fact check me here if you need to. I just checked for 2016, DPS was in debt to the tune of $3.5 billion. Is that correct, roughly? Dollars?
I mean, that might include the long-term debt. I mean, I know it took $617 million to alleviate the short-term debt from a large state.
Basically, a lot of money in debt. So Terence, what you're suggesting is remarkable, and all kids deserve that, but where does the money come from? How do you afford that?
Well, we're not we're not talking about a state that's bankrupt here. If you recall, we've been under emergency management, some form of emergency management since 1999. For about a year and a half, we were off it during that period, up until 2016, where we finally had an elected school board that's now in charge of our schools. So this is debt. You know, if there's a $3 billion debt in DPS, it's been caused by the state of Michigan.
And it's worth noting that
and it should be paid by the state.
I think that's an incorrect statement. There's a debt that we're talking about.
Let me just hear Erin, because I can't hear Erin. Erin, go on. What's it worth noting?
I just wanted to note that debt was the old district. So last year there was a sort of major piece of legislation that actually created a new school district in Detroit. So technically, officially, the district today has far less debt than that, if that was the figure that you had found. So in theory, the district is starting from scratch and is able to direct all of its per pupil funding that comes from the state into the classroom. So that's a fresh start that's supposed to help the district, and we'll see whether or not it does.
Gary, lean forward. I want to show you this cartoon here. It's from Merlin's mum. And it's if you look at the cartoon, you see the public school here, and then they're taking the bricks out of the public school and they're building the charter school using the bricks from the public school, and then the poor kids in the public school have a hole in their school building. You don't need much unpacking to get what that's all about. Do you agree? Do you care?
Well, I think what we've done in Michigan since 1993 is we've stopped funding school districts and we're funding school children. The state investment in education follows the child to the school of their choice. No longer do these districts own the children within that dotted line on the map. and they feel like they not only own the children, but the state funding that goes with them. Yes, we live in a competitive environment, and in every other aspect of our society, competition has led to efficiencies and has met diverse needs. That's what we're looking to see in education. It's not about funding DPS as an institution. It's about funding the children from Detroit and giving them a shot at a better outcome.
So I want to pick up on what you said. I just want to pick up on
work.
what you mentioned, what Gary mentioned, because we have a video comment that relates to it. And you said that, you know, the funding follows the child. So what people online are noting is that often when that happens, when the funding follows the child, those who are left behind in public schools, those schools are depopulated and their funds go down. And then sometimes that leads to schools being closed. So here's a video comment we got from someone named Hiram Rivera out of Philadelphia, and he gives an example out of 2 other U.S. cities. Have a look.
In 2013, the cities of Chicago and Philadelphia went through with plans to close the largest numbers of public schools in each city's history. This left the remaining schools grossly overcrowded, understaffed, and under-resourced. As a result, academic performance hasn't increased, some of the buildings have remained abandoned, and those that haven't have been sold off to developers who have turned them into high-priced apartments or to local universities who have turned them into facility buildings, furthering the gentrification of predominantly black neighborhoods in each city.
So, Teresa, you were nodding your head earlier. What do you have to say with what Aaron raised, that point about basically segregated schools?
Exactly, because we have people who are saying what's best for us, but they don't live in the communities in the aftermath of what happens when this destabilization of schools in our city causes, you know, buildings that are left behind as blight. When you have students who can't vote with their feet, as they so often use, and they have no transportation system to get the children to these choices that they have. And so they are there, and they are there with a school system that has been destabilized. Money has been taken away from their system to create and help other systems, but their system is going down. They all have to go to school somewhere. And I think, you know, in my day, when there was only one system, when it didn't work, you worked and did everything that you could to make it work. You didn't have the idea to just say, oh, I don't like this, so I'm going to go somewhere else. Oh, wait, I don't like it there either, so I'm going to go somewhere else. Well, who's going to fix the places where people stay and don't have a choice to go anywhere else?
Gary?
The influx of charter schools has dismantled
Terrence,
public schools.
Hold on a minute.
completely.
Terrence, hold on a minute. That was a great question. Gary, how would you respond?
I would say our focus needs to be on the student and not on the systems, not on the adult systems. And I don't know why that can't be the focus.
What about the students? Who's going to care about the students left behind? Are you only going to care about the students in your charter system, or are you going to care about us, the parents and the children in Detroit? Why are we looking at systems, and why aren't we looking at all the kids, Gary? All the kids are never going to be in a charter school. And so we have to make sure that both systems, if they are going to coexist, that they coexist correctly, that they are actually, everyone is concerned about the kids, not about the systems. You are concerned about the charter system while you are accusing us of
let me hear Gary respond. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, we're concerned about the kids in Detroit, and there are 45,000 kids who are currently in the new DPS district. We want that district to succeed. Almost everything that Detroiters asked for in the DPS bailout legislation occurred. You got rid of the emergency manager. You got rid of $700 million in debt. You got returned the elected school board. Detroiters are in control of Detroit public schools. We want them to succeed.
Also got in
but
that
if those schools don't, succeed, we want parents to have choices.
We are the only city in Detroit that now has a law that says we can have, you know, uncertified teachers in our classroom. We are
you
also
have the
option.
Only city your school board
in
has
Detroit.
The option. Well, wait, Terrence just said they have 250 vacancies that you can't fill.
Just reminding you that we also have
vacancies.
I'm just reminding you we have an international audience watching, so I want to make sure that you're unpacking this for our international audience as they're watching you, because you all understand each other, but we have a broader audience watching.
Make sure people know.
Yes, go ahead.
The law that was passed because the Detroit public schools could not fill hundreds of teaching vacancies. The legislature said if the district wanted to use uncertified teachers to fill some of those vacancies, that's a choice of the district. It's not a mandate to use uncertified teachers or a requirement. It's something the district is allowed
Let me show you
to
this.
do.
Why put it in the law? Why is it a
To
law
give you
on the
options.
books that the
To
most
give you
impoverished
options.
school district in our state is you're basically saying that these folks in this city don't matter. They don't matter as much as suburban
you
folks.
said 250 vacancies.
Okay. You're saying that
you
it's
said
okay
250
for
vacancies
non-certified
couldn't be
teachers
filled
to teach our
Terrence.
children here in Detroit.
I realize
That's
those
what the
uncertified
law- that's what you're
teachers
saying
aren't
because
paying
that's a
union
law.
dues to keep you afloat.
All right, so Gary
But
and
why
Terrence,
not
hold
have
tight
an
for a moment.
uncertified teacher
Just give me a moment. Just give me a pause. I'm going to
nobody?
wrap up the show after this 30-second ad. This 30-second ad was to support Betsy DeVos's nomination to be Secretary for Education. I think in this ad we might get a little inkling of maybe how she might run the Department of Education. Have a look.
Equal opportunity in education. All Americans support that, right? Wrong. Washington liberals oppose giving low-income families the same educational choices as everyone else. They're attacking President Trump's choice of Betsy DeVos for Education Secretary. DeVos believes in giving families a choice: charter schools, online schools, parochial schools, and outstanding public schools. Betsy DeVos will fight for equal opportunity in education for everyone.
Erin, I'm just curious because this is your beat. You've been looking at education independently as an independent journalist and looking at this. What do you see from what's happened in Michigan, in Detroit, that might happen on a nationwide scale?
I think it's pretty hard to tell, actually. The U.S. Secretary of Education doesn't have all that much power because the way education is run in the United States, it's a system of school districts that primarily report to the states. So the U.S. Secretary of Education, the Department of Ed, can incentivize states and encourage them. So I think the Secretary DeVos has said that she supports private school vouchers. She had actually led an effort to legalize vouchers in Michigan that was defeated because of the state constitution, and there wasn't enough popular support for that. But she could offer a program that would give states additional money if they created vouchers or other programs, for charter schools, or that ad mentioned online schools as well. But she wouldn't have the power to, sort of wave a wand and create private school vouchers across the country. It would have to be a matter left up to
still down to each individual state.
I want to clarify that Secretary DeVos has not said that the Michigan experience is what we should do across the country. She has said that the Florida experience to the south, that state has pursued the right balance of choice, quality, and accountability. And that state has improved their academic outcomes. Michigan is not a model of what to do. We are the tale of what happens when you do enough wrong. And that's what we've been doing.
Could you be the model of what not to do, perhaps? I'm going to leave that with a question mark hanging.
I think we are the model of what not to do, that we don't have enough choice. We don't have enough quality, and we don't have enough accountability.
So maybe
that's
your
what we've been fighting for.
Perhaps your painful experience might actually help the nation.
The teachers union and the Detroit establishment trying to get better outcomes for kids, and we have not been winning. But we're going to keep fighting.
Where we failed is in this. We have had too many folks without the experience, without the know-how, that aren't teachers, aren't administrators, haven't worked in a school, don't live in Detroit, don't send their kids to Detroit public schools, taking a vote away from the people. That's where we fail. That's where we fail.
So all
now
that.
I agree, and I definitely agree. And I agree what has happened in Detroit is that people who live here, who are the ones closest to the problem, have been denied any right in creating the solutions.
All right. Guests, thank you for giving us some insight into what's been happening in your state. Gary and Erin and Whitrice and Terrence. I know we could keep going. If this show was 2 hours long, we would still be talking right now, but it's not. Let me just wrap up with Malika.
And with 2 comments, one a supporter of DeVos, and she says it's because she agrees with her personal choice of schools that's important to her. Why isn't that obvious? Why are we so insecure that the government must be our nanny? On the other hand, this is Derek, who says it's hard for billionaires who haven't experienced upward mobility via public education to recognize it as the great uplifter.
Thank you so much, guests, for being part of our show this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. Take care.